except I'm guessing wrong. I suppose that we had a bit of it during the boot camp. Is that correct or wrong? Did we touch on DAX at all during the boot camp? Okay, so we had a touch of it, but maybe not in depth. Okay. Um, so we want us to go over it again. Um, okay. But because we had a foundation already, I believe that would have been a foundation for us, except probably the way we went by it, we just scratched it on the surface. So I want us to go to the chart, everyone. Type on the chart, rate yourself 1 to 10. What's your proficiency in DAX? Go to the chart, everyone, 1 to 10. Put a 10 if you're sure, you're confident, or some other values, depending. I expect everyone to respond. I expect every single person on the call. So this is 6. How many responses? Maybe 6 now. 7. And we are 12 on the call. So every single person. So who hasn't responded? Okay, I see 4, I see 1, I see 3, I see 4, I see 5. Okay. So 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. All
Please, what's the question?
right. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in DAX. That is the question. Okay, so 5. Okay, no one wants to go beyond 5. Everyone is saying 5. Um, I need to rate myself too. So uh, that's my own rating on DAX. So I don't know how we're gonna run this. Most people on the call are much better than myself. So what do we do? I need to hand over this to somebody. Those of us that rated ourselves 5 and 4 and 3, somebody should take over. Share your screen and let's listen. Oh, when I said somebody should share their screen, Ruth left the call and Ruth rated herself 5. Uh, hmm. Abiola, your option does not exist. You said 1 to 10. You said 0.5. Where does that fall? Wait, people are beginning to leave the call. Oh. When I said somebody should share their screen, what's happening? Are we safe? Are we still in power? Precious, what's one? Precious, what did you give yourself before? You gave yourself four now. Are you giving me the last prize? You gave yourself four before. So why has it turned to one? Cashless policy. No, Kingsley, that's politics. Two is two anywhere in the world, except you are talking about number basis. So if you are not putting into context number base, if you are all in base 10, two is two everywhere in the world. Okay, so let's go. As usual, I don't have a slide for this. It would have been nice if I had a slide, but I think we should just do a sort of a freestyle. And the reason why this is because I believe this is not a beginner's class. And essentially, and again, for me, whenever I want to do something that's technical, I really do not like using slides. It's a bit limiting when you use slides to discuss things that are technical. So I prefer that we do things. Let's see how it plays out. And by that, people will begin to tie one or the other things together. So essentially, when we talk about DAX, a quick revision. What is DAX anyways? Let me not assume. So since we said we want to start from scratch, so what is DAX? Okay, DAX is data analysis expressions. DAX is data analysis expressions. The expression that we see there as an indication. But before we go to that, in most tools or most languages, there are usually two things, or there are usually two ways to go about working with tools or languages. So when I say tools, what I'm referring to is something like Excel. I'm talking about something like SQL. I'm talking about something, sorry, I said SQL, no. I'm talking about something like SSMS. I'm talking about something like, say, Power BI, say Tableau, say Google Data Studio. All of these, they have their languages. And when we talk about languages holistically, there are two kinds of languages. It's either the language is a functional language or the language is a programming language. I mentioned that again. When we look at all tools that exist, or most tools that people use for things related to analysis, for development and stuff, those tools would deploy languages. But when we talk about languages holistically, languages can either be functional or they are programming. So a language is functional if it has some properties or features. And a language would be said to be programming if it has some features or properties. But before we go there, data analysis expressions, that is the language of Power BI. Excel has its own language. Tableau has its own language. Anybody uses Tableau here? Anybody? You have an idea of Tableau? Anybody? Or we are all Microsoft centric people? Okay, Yinka, you have an idea of Tableau. What have you used Tableau for before now? Yes, we can speak so to maximize our time.
I just started learning Tableau, and I only use it for the only analysis I did on it was the superstore.
Sorry, you say you use it for what?
I use it for superstore data. That's the only project I've done on it. I just started learning it.
Okay, okay. So, but Tableau has its own language too, right?
Kind of, because the learning was not a structured learning. It's just like watching videos, and so it wasn't like a detailed learning. So I don't know the language it uses, but I know it is not like
Okay,
that one of Power BI.
okay. I did Tableau for maybe about a week. So I would say I have 1 week experience in Tableau. I think that's pretty much. So but the reason why I dropped it was probably one is I had to, I think the subscription is pretty heavy and I couldn't crack how to get a trial version for the Tableau desktop. So, but I know that Tableau has its own language. I'm not so sure if that's the language, but I know that when you're working with Tableau, they call something LOD. I think it's level of detail or something like that. So, which is more of some definitions that you give to your DAX in Power BI. Why did I come here? Whenever we have any sort of language at all, any sort of tool, yeah, thanks, Yinka, any sort of tool at all, there's usually a language attached to that tool. And I mentioned that the language can be what and what. What and what? A functional language is a language that deals with function calls. It's a language that all the functions that you would need to work within that language, they have already been pre-built into the language package. That is what a functional language is. So when you think of Excel, Excel works with Excel is a tool that runs on functional language. Why is that? Because if I want to do sum in Excel, I only need to call a function that has already pre-built in it to give or to evaluate things based on summation. There is a function dedicated for that already pre-built into the system to undo that. So that is what a functional language is. But when we talk about programming languages are languages that you do the entire definition yourself. The entire definition will be managed yourself. There is nothing as much that has been pre-built for you. Okay, so and I'm talking awesomely about the languages now. So I'm not talking in the aspect of you going into the libraries. When you go into the libraries of programming languages, what the libraries have done for you, they are more like the functional languages, having some things already predefined. But when we look at programming languages at the surface level, holistically, what we know of them is that they don't have things that have already been pre-built. You as the programmer would be the one to define every single thing yourself. So assuming you are working with Python, how many people do Python here? How many? You've used Python even just once. Yes, no, yes, no, yes. Okay, I say some hands up. Okay, three hands, right? So assuming that in Python now, we have a list of numbers, a list or a set. Okay, we have a list of numbers and we want to calculate the sum of those numbers. What you would want to do, if I remember well, is to define a function. You're going to set the start point, and then you would iterate over the entire values that you have in the list before you can get the sum. Is that correct? Is that how would we approach it? Maybe it's been about, no, I did Python in the nano degree. So, but that's not the kind of Python we did. People have forgotten. Is that how you normally would do sum? Is that? Okay. So, which means that in programming languages at the base level, you don't have some things predefined for you. You need to define them. You need to run through them the way you would actually want them to play out. And that is the principal difference between a functional language and a programming language. So when we look at DAX, DAX is a functional language. It is not a programming language. And now I know we understand why DAX is a functional language. DAX is the language of Power BI, but DAX did not start in Power BI. DAX started in Power Pivot in Excel, and Power Pivot in Excel has been in existence in Excel since 2010. 2010, Power Pivot got into Excel as an add-in, so you need to install it separately to bring it into your Excel. And the language upon which it runs is DAX. DAX is also available in SQL Server Analysis Services. So for those of us that we do SQL Server Analysis Services tabular, the calculations you're doing on your tabular model, you're still writing DAX there. There is just a slight difference in the syntax, but the functions and how they have nearly the same thing. So DAX is also there. Why is DAX said to be expressions? Let me just iterate or highlight something there before we go into the actual thing. I'm doing this so that we understand why we are doing what and why what is playing out the way it plays out. When we say something is an expression, now I want to bring us back to elementary mathematics. We have an expression and we have equations. What is the difference? What's the difference between expressions and equations? People have forgotten mathematics. Some of us, we left secondary school when? About 20 years ago, and equations. Hmm. Okay, Abiola, equations are equal to zero. Okay, Abiola, you asking me? I see a question mark there. Is that a question to us? Expressions are like statements. Equations are like formulas. Okay. Expression is you expressing yourself in layman language. Eating is you eating something. What's the difference between expressions and equations? When we say equations, equations is about assignment. It's you assigning something to something. So we say that A plus B equal to C. It means that whatever the values of A and B, the summation of that, whatever it is, must be equal to C. And we can save it inside of C. That's more like an assignment. But when we say expression, expression is just a way of you defining something. You are making definitions for something. That is what expressions are. So for instance, if I say that For us to get the distance of your home, the distance between your home to the office, you need to measure the length of this plus how long it will take you. That is you expressing yourself. So it is only when you assign the result of that to something or you equate it to something that's when it becomes an equation. But what I'm driving out in this is that when we talk about DAX being an expression, it's more of you running some thought process around definitions of some things. How do you want to define some things to get the results that you want to get? And that would bring me to a general overview of DAX in the sense that DAX is more of a thought process. So there is something you want to achieve. You want to calculate, for instance, a running total. You want to calculate a running total such that when you are on June, for instance, now, you need a summation of all your sales figures from January to June. That is what a running total is. Okay, a summation of January to June. When you get to July, it will be January to July. When you get to August, it will be January to August. You understand this. Then how do you express yourself in a language that Power BI would understand? And then it's able to translate to the result that you expect based on the data that you have fed into it. Then what you're doing is you are expressing yourself. So two things are very important to learn DAX. Remember when we started? I gave myself a 2 in DAX, so I don't know DAX, but I'm following us in this. So two things are very important to master DAX. One is we must have data that would provide that answer, a data that can speak to that result. Number two is that you must understand the problem itself. If we do not understand the problem itself and we have the data, you obviously cannot write a DAX that would work for it. You just be doing trial and error. If you understand the problem, but you don't have data that would feed into that correctly, you still would not get any result. Your DAX will most likely be throwing errors. So we must have data. We must understand the problem. And thirdly is you need to know the DAX functions that would work for that. But the third one is not as important. Yes, I mean it. It's not as important. For instance, if you're working in Excel, Excel has about 600 functions or more than. You don't necessarily need to understand all the functions before you can solve some problems in Excel. You don't need to. A combination of three, four, five other functions can do what a single function would do. So if you don't know that single function, but you know the baselines, you might be able to combine the baselines and then you get the result you want. The same thing is applicable in DAX. DAX has well over 200 functions. Now, if this year alone, they have released about 5 or up to 10 functions in DAX. So now you have the offset, you have the Windows function, and a whole lot of other ones. So the important thing is that you don't necessarily need to learn all the functions, but there are some very important functions. In Excel, they will say there are about 60. When you know some 60 functions in Excel, you should be able to solve any problem in Excel. Yes, by combining those when you understand the problem you want to solve. The same thing is applicable in DAX. Maybe there are some like 30 something, 40 functions in DAX that when you know them very well, you should be able to navigate your ways around getting answers to the most common problems. So in essence is that two things are very obligatory. You have the data that would feed that problem. You understand the problem itself. And the third is you know the functions that would drive that. So let's go into Power BI now. So I'm going to share my screen. So Okay, so let me do something. Um, can we still see my screen? Can we see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So first is I have a data model here already. This is an exercise file for I'm building it out for something, so I can use it for this class as well. So I have a data model here. This data model is doing a live connection to my SSMS, so it's feeding from the SQL Server Management Studio, and it's actually live connection, but I did something else in it, so that's why we can see here like this. So if I come to these tables, you'll see that the tables uses direct query and cannot be shown. So all these tables will not show. So because it's a live connection, it's not, we are not meant to view the data here. So let's start with something. There are a couple of reasons why we would want to work with DAX. The bottom line is that for some reason or reports that we want to build, we can go on to build a full report without writing DAX. I can say that convincingly. You can go on to build a full report without writing DAX. If it's a basic report, your report is not complex, you're not getting, excuse me, you're not getting some crazy requirements. It's just normal stuff that you want to visualize. Then you can just do some drag and drop. Your report is ready and everything is good to go. But now you have some requirements that needs you to write DAX. How do you begin to write your DAX? Why should you write DAX? And what are the kinds of results you need to expect when you are writing DAX? I want to take this in steps. Obviously, we can't cover it all in this class. Depending on what you decide on, this might be a series that we want to continue at other times. But I don't want to rush this as well, so that we can put a balance to some things and be sure that we understand what something mean before we go on to some other things around it. The very first reason why you want to write DAX is that you need new tables within your data model. You have a data model like this. You have some tables already existing within your data model, but you want to find a way to add new tables within this data model that would assist you achieve some goals within your report. That is the first reason why you would want to write DAX. And one of these tables is the calendar table. We already do know why we would need a calendar table. Part of it is even on your visualization, if you're doing your visualization normally, so if I come here, if I add a line chart, and then I go onto my fact internet sales table, and if I select sales amount. Sorry, I've eaten some things, so I need to just bring them back to life quickly. So I need my order dates column from here. So I'm just gonna hide that. And then I come back here and I select order date. So I have this here now. This order date saying January 2021, blah, 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 and like that. So normally in your own data model, if you have a date like this, you drag it on the x-axis. It's very possible that you have your dates, you have the full hierarchy of dates, or you have date table somewhere pre-built for you, blah, blah, blah. It's very possible. But now I have a dim date. So let me just go to my dim date and let me select the English month name. Here's the English month name. So I'll select English month name and I'll pick this, I'll drop this on the x-axis. So I have this already. So because this is coming from a database, so that is why we have our months correctly sorted. So if this now, okay, it's not even correctly sorted. So this is sorting alphabetically. And this is because of the fact that there is something that needs to be done on this table before it can sort normally. So when you have a date column within your data model, and that date column is what you're using for your reporting, and you are taking your month, for instance, using it on a line chart as the case is, what you expect, the expected experience is that your month is sorted this way. So you need something to force it to sort the way you would want it to. And that's one of the reasons why you need a date table. Number two, when you begin to do some time intelligence calculations, your time intelligence calculations would work properly when you have a contiguous, they call them contiguous dates, continuous set of dates from start to finish of the year. Let me leave it at that. So we know that one of the tables that we'll need, that most often than not, you'll be the one to create it as the Power BI developer, is a date table. If you are pulling data from a standard database or a data warehouse, most likely the database designer or the developer would have developed in it a date table that you can plug directly into. If that's the case, then you're good. You can shoot up. But if it's a situation whereby you are not pulling from a standard database as such, you're the one gathering your data from different sources, then essentially you want to build a date table yourself. If you want to build a date table, the first thing is when you are on your data view as such, you most likely would have a tab at the top that says table tools. Under your table tools, you have a calculations group, and then you have a new table button. So if you hover on the new table button, it tells you write a DAX expression to create a new table. So before you can generate a new table right from here, you need to write a DAX measure. So I'll click on that. And so now we want to start to build our date table. What function do we already know that allows us to build, generate dates? What function do we already know? They are my co-facilitators. So what function enables us to build a date table? Okay, calendar auto. Calendar auto is one of the functions that we can use to build a date table. Okay, calendar auto, perfect. But now, if I go on here and I say, I give my table a name. If I give my table a name, I call it date, and then I say calendar auto. What calendar auto would do is whenever you tab on a function like that, you are expected to get a description of what it does. It says it returns a table with one column of dates calculated from the model automatically. So this does not necessarily require you to enter some input. What this needs is you have a data model already, but with a condition that there must be a column at least. There must be a column at least on your data model that has the date or the date time data type. If on your entire data model you do not have any column that's of the date or date time data type, calendar auto would fail, because calendar auto is looking at your data model, looking for dates within your data model, and then by that it's able to now generate some set of dates for you, full dates for you. So if I see calendar auto, I close and open my bracket, I hit enter. This will generate dates for me. So this is from 1916, and this will go down to, so if I sort descending, let me see when the last date is, 2014. That's about 100 years of dates. Okay, this is a way to generate dates. And after now, you have a single column now, so you can now go on to now add some other columns to this. So this is a DAX class, so we want to explore. So assuming that we don't want to use calendar auto, so there are some other functions that we can use. Okay, we can use the calendar function. There is a calendar function, but I want us to call back to this later. If I use my calendar auto, as the case is, I'll need to now start clicking on new column to add every other column to this. What if I want to do this on a go? I want to have all my columns already within a single function. If I want to do that, then I have another function I can use, which is the add columns function. So if I say add columns, what does this do? It says I want to try to bring this, take these guys away. So it says that it returns a table with new columns specified by the DAX expressions. This returns a table as well with new columns. Returns a table with new columns specified by the DAX expression, which means that add columns can go on, can take all the expressions that we need for a new table, and it will split them out into different columns. But what do we need to start with? To start with, we need what our first column would be, which is what would be the table itself. What is that thing that would generate the table itself? Am I back online? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay. So now, what is that function that will generate the table itself, which is the first column of the table, which you can then begin to now reference. So which is our usual calendar auto. So I can say calendar auto. I'll put calendar auto here. I'll close the bracket. So that is what would generate the table for us. Then the next set of argument are in pairs: name and expression. Name is what is the column name. Expression is how do you want to generate data within that column. So I'll put a comma here. I'll control shift tab to go to the next line. So what is the name of the other column? So we want our year, because this is a string. So I'm going to wrap it in quotation. I'll put a comma. Then how do you want the items within this column generated? And one powerful thing about these add columns is, even while writing, it already do know what the result of this calendar auto would be, and it should be able to reference it for us. So now for our year column, we want to use the year function, and then where is the date? So I'll just call on this date, and then I'll close the bracket here. So I'll put a comma. I'll go to the next line, the months, and then I'm gonna use the format function. the dates, and 3 months. We already done all of this. Then for, let's say we need the month number, and say the month. So assuming that we need the weekday, so the weekday or day of week. So we have I can do a format for this as well, and then I say it should return 3 days for me. So needs the week num. We have the week num function, and then that is asking for the date. And so assuming that this is all, I close my add column function. And then if I hit enter now, so what I expect is that all these columns all should come out at once. So that is what I expect. So instead of having calendar auto generate the first column for us, and then we now writing individually for the next set of columns, we can use the add columns function to now generate the full calendar for us. So this is another approach. Let's take this a step further now. I mentioned something very important when it comes to the necessity or the features of the calendar table, which is that the calendar table we expect it to have set of continuous dates. So if I have sales from January 2022, the 1st of January 2022 till May 24, 2023. If those are the set of dates I have on my data model, 1st of January 2022 to the 24th of May 2023, then, and I want to generate a calendar table from that, my calendar table is expected to have the full set of dates, which is from the 1st of January 2022 till the 31st of December 2023. Do we understand that? So, which is the meaning of your dates being contiguous. So you have full set of dates and those dates are contiguous. So you're looking at the 1st of January 2022 till the 31st of December 2023. Cool. So now we want to now generate some our calendar table now using the calendar function. We want to generate our calendar table using the calendar function. But I want you to give it a try. Remember that if I come here to say that, if I come here and I say new table, and then I call on the calendar function here, what calendar function expects is the start date and the end date. So the question now is, generate your own calendar table. The start date must reference the first day of the start year, and the end date must also reference the last date of the end year. So which means this would always be dynamic. When we have sales for the next year, it would go on to reference what the date, it will expand the calendar table, and then we'll fill in the dates in between for us. So I want you to give it a try now, but you have to use the calendar function. Did we get what I want us to do first? Do we understand it? Anybody here? or we all have left, or we are watching the election result.
We are here.
Okay, do we understand what I want us to do?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so let's do
Understand,
that. Okay, let's do that. Then we share your codes on the chat. So I'll be waiting. So you share your codes on the chat before we proceed. So DAX is about doing. If you're not doing, you obviously won't get a good grasp of it. So that's the mistake some people make. They go on jumping from classes to classes. So they will hear somewhere, okay, somebody is demystifying DAX. They go and attend. DAX for dummies, they will attend. Advanced DAX, they will attend. It's about getting the foundation clear and then doing a lot more practice. So generate your date table using the calendar function and you share your code on the chart. Yes,
Please, can I
yeah,
speak?
yeah.
Currently, I'm not connected with my laptop. I'm connecting with my phone because we don't have light since yesterday. So, but I can say little about the calendar function. Am I permitted to go ahead?
Just hold on. So when we're gathering responses, then you speak then.
Uh,
All right, thank you. So I'm waiting. Let's do have a result on the chart. Okay, so I have two responses. Precious, it isn't bringing out the exact date. What's the results looking like for you? Are you getting errors? Okay, it's bringing out four rows for you. Hmm. You need to check your start and end dates that you have referenced them correctly. Okay, so um seems most of us are not connected with our system, so we won't do so much. So because I need us to practice, that's the only way we can I can be sure that we're following. So I will just further my explanation on this, and this is where we're gonna stop. All right. So now, okay, yes, Yinka, you wanted to say something then.
Recently, I used the calendar function to generate a calendar date. However, when I use the start date as the normal date and the end date as the normal date, it didn't give me the date I was expecting until I used the number format for the start date and the end date. That is like for 20, for the number format like 4231 like that for the start and the end date. That was when it brought the correct date for me.
Sorry, I'm trying to process that. What's the date
The
format you
calendar,
used earlier?
the calendar function is going to ask for the start date and the end date. So when I use, for
Mm-hmm,
example, March 1st, 2022, that's
mm-hmm.
01/05/2022, and the end date as maybe July 1, 2022, for example. So when I use it like that, it did not give me the date, it gave me error. So when I now converted the date to number format and used the number format for the calendar, like calendar open bracket 42531, comma 43531 like that, the exact number format for the date I wanted to use. That was when it brought out the date.
Okay. So ordinarily use the calendar function because of the rigidity there. So, but for the start date, I suppose if we say, for instance, that this is starting on 01/01 2022, and the end date, so let me say the end date is 31/07 2023. So let's see if this will give us result. So now this gave us 01/01/2022, and the last date we expect to see here should be 31/07/2023. So Yinka, did you wrap your date inside quotation like this for the one that gave you error?
No, I didn't. I just got the mistake now.
Yeah, so you need to wrap it in quotation marks. So, but now this is pretty much rigid in the sense that whenever we are working with this calendar date, our date would always end on this particular end date, which is not what we may want to do, because when we now have transactions outside of this date, they would automatically be truncated on our report because you're picking a date from here and it's looking at a date that is beyond that in your report. Dates beyond this will be truncated on your report. Excuse me. So how then do we manage this? Let's walk through the build process. One is we want the start date to be the first transaction date within our data model. That's the start date. Okay. So I'll just clear this out. And for us to get this the list of things, now we have 01/01/2022 to 31/07/2023. If you want to get the list of which one is smaller here, what function can we use to get that, even in Excel? If you want to get what is smaller, minimum, mean, excellent. Okay, Latifa said my screen is not showing what I'm explaining. Is that correct? Is it the same for everyone? Sorry, I didn't hear that. Is it the same for everyone? Can anybody see my screen? Okay. So Latifa, maybe you need to rejoin the meeting. Okay. All right. So we need to use the main function. So the main function would always go down to the list date. So I'll use the main function to pull out the transaction date on my fact table. So, the fact table is where we are recording transactions. So, which in this case is the fact internet sales for me. So, I'll call on my fact internet sales and I'll go on to the order date. So, what is the least order date that we have, which technically will translate to the first order date within our data model? That is the start date I want to use. Then the end date I want to use will obviously be the maximum. So the maximum of the fact internet sales and then the order date. So which means that we are looking at what is the list date on our data model and give us all the dates from that list date down to the maximum date on the data model. So I'll close my bracket for calendar and I'll hit enter here. So now we have from 2010. So we had our first transaction on the 29th of December 2010. And when was our last transaction? The last transaction was in 2014, 2801. This is pretty much dynamic in a way. Okay, we are not there yet. Because when we have transactions outside of after 2801, 2014, this would automatically expand. Do we agree? Do we agree to that? Okay. And the reason why this will automatically expand is we have asked it to always look at our calendar table. It should always look at, sorry, the fact table. And whatever the maximum date on the fact table is, that is what it should always return as the end date for our calendar. But the challenge with this is this calendar table is not fulfilling the other condition of our calendar table, which is that it's must, yes, it's fulfilling the fact that it is continuous, but it's not fulfilling the fact that it has to be from the start date of that year and then the last date of the end year. How do we manage that? So that's when your understanding of a number of other functions within DAX would come to play. What do we need to do here? We need to now find a way of defining our own date for the start and the end date, but it must always reference what the year is. The year is the most important thing here now. We don't necessarily need to know what exact date within the year. So we know that the end year is 2014. So we want the date up to the end of 2014. We know that the start year is 2010. So we want the date from the start of 2010. We want to disregard where it is, wherever, whatever the actual date within those years are. So let's pull out the year first. So I'll say year, I'll wrap this in the year function, and then I'll wrap this also in the year function. Okay. But now if I hit enter here, I expect this to give an error because okay, it actually converted it into date for me. Somehow it converted it into date for me, but that's not what we want yet. That's not the correct conversion even. So now we have our year, we know our year already, but then how do we now construct our own actual date from this? So what we'll do is there is a date function. For those of us that we are coming from a somewhat solid Excel background, we'll know we have a date function in Excel as well. And the date function is asking for three things. What is your year? What is your month? And what is your day? So our year is what we have defined here now. So I'll come here, I'll put a comma. Okay, it's meant to be outside after this bracket. I'll put a comma here. What then will be our month? Anybody? What do you think should be our month here? What should be our month? 01. Why 01? January. Excellent. Because we want to force it to always reference January. Correct. So now I'll put a 1 here, and then the day I'll put a 1 because I want it always to default to that very first day within that year. Then I'll do the same thing here, date, and then we know the year already. So this is the year. Then the month is 1, and the month here will be what for the maximum? What will be the month in this case? Is it also 1? 12. Perfect. So the month here will be 12, and then the day would be 31. So if this works correctly, then we should get our results now. And now, so if we look at this now, if I go back to the sorts, so now we have 01012010, and this goes down to the last. So if I sort descending, we'll see what the last is, 31st 12 2014, which is a way to manage the dynamism between this and the calendar auto. So now what we actually do need here, which we have catered for, is the aspect of the year. So it will always go to our data model to figure out what the maximum year on our fact table is. And it will figure out what the minimum year on our fact table is. Once it's able to know the minimum year and the maximum year, the date function would assist us construct the start date from the minimum year and the end date from the maximum year. And this would always be dynamic, which means once we have a sale on the 1st of January 2023, for instance, the year would change to 2023, and then it will go on to produce the full date for us in 2023. Do we understand what has happened here? Do we understand? Okay. So, okay. All right. I think we should stop here for the major facts that most of us who are not with our system, we won't be able to practice along, which is something I would always want to avoid, most especially because of the nature of what we are doing. So in essence is that if we so agree, we might want to continue this in our next meetup. If we want to follow what the schedule is, that's it's totally left to us. But two things, like I mentioned at the start, one is we need to ensure that we are on the call as early as possible. We'll only be allowing 2 minutes thereabouts to expect that we join, and we should have at least one third of us on the call. Then also let's try and make our ways around ensuring that we have our systems with us. So that's how we can get the best from this. Well, did we get anything from today's session at all? Did we anything of value to us? If you did not get anything, you can as well let us know so that we know what we need to do differently. Yinka's hand is up. Yeah. All right. So let's put it to a out here. So we'll decide on what to do next time. But please let's bear in mind those points, and let's practice this as well. We see in our next meeting.
Bye. Thank you.